in terms of going viral, and you wrote a post about how to do that, what if we could boil it down into to the three levers or two levers that really had this like almost pandemonium like lift off for your content? What would you say it is? Because I think you talked something about stacking content together. What's that about?
Well, the first thing I just want to caveat is that the stuff that I talked about was my sort of own personal innovations, but obviously I piled those innovations on top of a ton of best practice, which I won't go into because you can get it from lots of different places. But, you know, there are...
What are some of the best practices? Sorry, I'm just asking this.
Oh, so, you know, if you like...
I don't really follow any of that stuff. I just write it, but I probably could learn a thing or two. Like,
yeah, I mean, I thought it was really important for me just to kind of get the basics covered off. So if you look at someone like, you know, Justin Welsh, he's the sort of like the stock LinkedIn guru. And, you know, he's got these online courses and they're very simple and they just go through a whole bunch of stuff, you know, like how to just get your profile in shape, you know, really, really super basic stuff. But ultimately, you know, you need to do it. And, or, you know, even like that, it's more sophisticated than this, but it's like the optimal amount of times to post is once a day, every weekday, or, make sure that your posts have a hook. You know, there's all of this sort of pretty basic stuff. I say basic, but like most people who are trying to play the game aren't doing it. But
yeah, so does that, because everyone's on this carousel craze at the minute.
Yeah.
And this, at the end of each post, it's like, if you like it, reshare it, repost it or something. Does that actually work? Or is that just everyone doing, because everyone seems to be doing that now. I see on LinkedIn.
Well, I think they're just ripping me off there because I was pushing that one. I thought I was quite innovative with that particular little bit, but the carousels do fundamentally perform better for whatever algorithmic reason, which is a bit annoying because they're more labor. But then, of course, LinkedIn wants to have higher quality content, so I guess it kind of makes sense. So that's the main thing, the main reason why you're seeing the carousels. The carousels also you can put a big fat call to action at the end of them, which is harder to do in a text post or something. So I think those are the main things with the carousels. Now, so there's, again, this is a lot of the just sort of like basic, I say basic, but a lot of people don't know it. I just don't want to, you know, I don't want to like sort of like waste everyone's time telling you a whole bunch of LinkedIn number one, I'm not an expert, and number two, you can get them from loads of other better sources than me. But my personal...
So sorry, mate, to interrupt, but like, no, you're not wasting people's time. Sometimes the basics is the important things. Just if you rattle them off, you don't even have to go into them. So it's like the hook. I
mean, the basic stuff that I think mattered, which I didn't invent, I just sort of learned, was, okay, number one, get your profile in the right shape. Number two,
what does that look like?
Oh, it's a whole bunch of boring stuff, like turn on creator mode and like make sure that you have a good sort of banner image and put some links in your featured section and, you know, kind of housekeeping type things, which I don't actually know if LinkedIn, if the algorithm cares about that stuff, but obviously you're trying to pull people through to your profile and then you want to give them a good, smooth experience when they're on the profile. You know, there's a whole bunch of stuff about that little headline that you put beneath your name where you say, you know, founder of the Hungry podcast or whatever it is you say. So there's a whole sort of like theory about good things to put there, which I can't really remember much of the nuggets, but the basic gist of it is you kind of want to say what problem you solve for people there. So these kind of lots of these sort of like housekeeping, getting the foundations in order stuff. Then you come onto your content. Now, yeah, you're right. I mean, I say this like it's all obvious. I suppose it isn't necessarily obvious to people. Next thing, when you're going to start making content, you obviously need to know, well, what do I write about? And which is really means what value am I giving to people? Why the hell should anybody follow me? So, again, classic. What problem am I solving? What benefit are they going to get from it? What are the different kind of pillars within the problem that I solve, which I can write content about? And you could get very, very formal and laborious when it comes to mapping out your different types of content that you put out there and the different subjects that you talk about. And for most people, that would probably be a good idea, because if you can't just come up with killer content off the top of your head, then you should probably systematize it. So again, like I say, I don't do this, so I don't really know much about it, but you might say, for sake of argument, okay, I'm Dan, I give useful tips for FMCG founders. Therefore, there are 5 pillars under which FMCG founders worry about. There's marketing, there's team, there's fundraising, there's something else, supply chain, I don't know. And then you're like, here are my 5 opinions under each one of these pillars. So I think marketing should be done like this. I think that fundraising should be done like this. And then each one of those 5 opinions, I can write that 5 different ways. So that's 5 times 5 is 25 times 5 is 125. So you got 125 posts there in theory. So that is the sort of formal way where then you're like, okay, this is all the stuff that I talk about, and now I can kind of put it out there. Probably use a scheduler to do that. Most people do, although I've stopped doing that.
How come?
I believe, although everybody would disagree with me, but it's just my personal experience, that the posts perform worse when they go out there with a scheduler. I think that there's something in the LinkedIn algorithm that this is just pure conspiracy theory, I've got no proof, that favors you if LinkedIn sees you dicking about on the platform for 5 minutes before posting. Whereas if you post in absentia with a scheduler, I don't think it performs as well. So I'm probably just paranoid about that. But now I don't use a scheduler. Actually, funnily enough,
what scheduler were you using?
First, I used Social Champ because it was a free one. Then I switched on to Taplio, which is a much more sophisticated one, because Taplio could do carousels and Social Champ couldn't. But I think Social Champ can do carousels now. And it's got a whole bunch of other kind of like functionality, which other people might find useful, but I think are kind of nonsense, like getting AI to write content for you and stuff like that. So it's got loads of like pretty sophisticated functionality, but I was just using it as a basic scheduler. So then I was doing 1 post a week, and obviously I know, well, I'm improving it all the time, but I knew the general stuff that I wrote about. And then this is now getting into slightly more insightful territory, I think. So you've probably seen that famous Jack Butcher visualize value image where it has kind of like a flat line going along with no results, and then the little quote saying, "This is pointless." And then after that, it suddenly booms. And the moral of the story is, if you keep on going long enough, eventually it'll compound and you'll break through. And in my case, my graphs did look exactly like that. So I had 6 months of like pretty flat nothingness, and then suddenly overnight, kaboom, like a rocket ship. But I think that graph and that principle, although it's valuable in one sense, in that, yes, you do need to keep on turning up, fine, I get that. But I think it's really misleading, because it implies that if you just keep doing the same thing and you keep on trying, eventually you're going to break through. And that isn't true. I genuinely think that you could keep on pumping out crap for literally years and you'll never ever break through, because you're not producing something that people want to see. So although I did have 6 months of like sort of not unsuccessful posting, but not anything special, I wasn't just kind of plodding along and waiting to win the lottery. I was doing an intense amount of thought and consideration over what worked, what didn't, improving the quality of my writing, improving the quality of the hooks, the headlines, all that stuff. And so one tool which I use a lot is a analytics tool called Shield, which is just like LinkedIn analytics, but it stores all of your posts and it tells you, I mean, it's mostly information that you can actually get natively on LinkedIn. It's just a bit of a more convenient format. So you can just look back on it and you can just sort all your posts by which posts got the most impressions, which posts got the most likes. And then you can look at them and say, okay, well, what do these posts have in common that the crap ones didn't? And then, you're starting to build and build and build. So, I was sort of like,
yeah. What was in common with the crap posts and what was in common with the good posts? Because I mean, to be honest, I probably should do all this stuff. I don't. I just kind of just write what's in my head and then just throw it out there if it works. But yeah, what was good about the good posts? What was bad about the bad posts?
Good about the good posts. So I'm sorry to say that clickbaity stuff really does work. I mean, there's good clickbait and there's bad clickbait, but to me, it's still all kind of like clickbait where you're saying something like, the unbelievable secret behind the Elon Musk's that kind of stuff. And the reason that it works is because it forces people to click that see more thing and go on to the next line. And then LinkedIn loves it if someone clicks that see more thing. And so then that gets it sent to more people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that first line has got to make people read the second line, and the second line has got to make people read the third line. Again, these are sort of classic lessons which anyone will tell you, but it's still very hard to get the knack of doing it. Whereas what I see a lot of on LinkedIn and what I was doing a lot before is that people like to just sort of come out with opinions that they have. And the opinions actually can be really, really interesting, but they don't have that FOMO factor, right? They don't have that feeling of like, oh, I need to hear this. So it's quite successful to make some sort of big, bold, contrarian opinion, like I don't know, like people think that I can't even think of what a contrarian opinion would be.
But I know what you mean. So like, because I've looked into this, so I'm going in on YouTube with this podcast, as I'm a bit late to the party, but podcast 30%. A podcast now found on YouTube. That YouTube have just created well, it's owned by Google, so it's a search engine. But what I've been learning and researching a lot into is how important the hook is. The hook's more important on YouTube than it is on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, people are accustomed to written. It's a more written format. You've got longer to play with, and actually, you're in your own pocket of an industry. So we're in the challenger brand space. So it's easier to build in that niche. Whereas on YouTube, it's a fucking free-for-all. It's mad. But this guy's got this thing about great hooks, which is negative. And this is what pisses me off, but I'm kind of having to put my ego aside and use them. But like, negative hooks work. So if you say the top 10 mistakes Mind Figures made when trying to build Mind Figures is better than the 10 lessons Mind Figures had when they build it. Words like actually work. So how to actually win.
I always use the actually. It's absolutely
win a Waitrose listing versus how to win a Waitrose listing. The biggest mistakes you're making will do better than like this is how to do it well. So as fucking annoying it is, negativity works with hooks. What are some of the hooks that have performed really well for you?
How I ... is always a winner. People love any how thing. It's pretty basic.
Thing is, mate, you're saying this is basic, but it's not. It's just, you know, I think it's because you're so engulfed into it. Yeah.
Yeah. No. It's not basic. It's common if you've been looking into this stuff, which I have. So I feel like these are all like cliches not worth mentioning. But that's because I've been studying this stuff. If you hadn't been studying this stuff, then they aren't. Then it's completely different. So
Also,
how
cliche is cliche for a reason, I always say.
damn right. So how I ... Anything around sort of secret or hidden. So I had a good post that was the secret process of expert thinkers that succeeded well for obvious reasons. A much more subtle one. This isn't a hook, but it's something I've really noticed that people bloody love any post where they can say, "I feel seen." Right? I get that comment with quite a lot with the best posts where you say,
feel seen.
Yeah, so where somebody feels like you've articulated something that they do or they think and they felt a bit ashamed about, and you're saying, you know what, actually this is the right thing to think or the right way to do it or whatever. So people love a bit of solidarity. This is why this is a real practical and challenging point. It's very easy to build an audience of your peers where all of your posts are applause lines. So, for example, let's say you're a founder of a Hungary style brand, and then you can do a whole bunch of posts that are like, here's what sucks about pitching to retailers or something. And then all of the other founders are going to be like, bravo, God, yeah, doesn't it suck? Da, 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 da. And you're going to build that audience. Or maybe you're a copywriter in an ad agency and you can do posts that are going to be like, don't you just hate it when account handlers give you a crap brief? Da, 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 da. And that's such an easy audience to grow. Any peer thing, people bloody love, because it basically, to this being seen point, everyone's sort of slapping each other's back and sort of like commiserating with each other about how bad their life is or whatever. The problem with that is that there are exceptions to this, but for the most part, you aren't selling to peers. You're selling to a different party. So I'm not selling to other strategists. I'm selling to founders, chief execs. If you're a founder, you're not selling to other founders. You're selling to investors or to retailers or whatever. So it's much harder game to do content that's going to build your audience with potential customers. And of course, we got to stop and think, why the hell are we doing this? Maybe you're doing it because you just love the validation, and I wouldn't blame you, because who doesn't love the validation? But if you're just getting applause lines from peers, then it's not without value, because you are building reputation within your industry and things like that. But it's not a super easy to commercialize audience that you're building. Like, if you were to use the example of founders, if you were some amazing bloody founder in the FMCG space who somehow managed to be followed by every buyer and every investor in the industry, then you'd be laughing, wouldn't you? But you're not gonna achieve that by posting like, here's why it's shit to be a founder, or here's why it's fun to be a founder, or anything which is basically targeted at other founders, which is unfortunately what you're going to get a lot of positive feedback on. And then you'll start doing more of that, but you've got to step back and say, why am I doing this?
I love that, because LinkedIn can be a self-congratulating carousel of crap, to be honest. And it's really interesting. So I wrote a post about the issue with data for brands, and I basically said, I used the analogy of football, and I said, people are like, oh, I got a bit of stick saying, oh my god, you're so anti-data, I said, I'm not anti-data. I said, it's like football. You need to use data as defense as a brand. Data will tell you, when say it's a listing in Waitrose or Sainsbury's, data will tell you availability, data will tell you your rate of sale, data will tell you the stores that are doing well that may need some love, the stores that are doing crap that will need some extra love. But the issue so that's your defense. You have to have data to defend. But using data to attack, i.e. innovate, is really dumb, because every brand is looking at the same data, which means you get the same inputs as we were talking about earlier, which means you get the same outputs. That's why every protein bar looks the same. That's why RTD cocktails are beginning to look the same. Looking at the same data, using data to innovate is really dumb, but not using data to defend is also really dumb. And I basically said, imagine putting Harry Kane in goal, that would be pretty dumb, and putting Jordan Pickford up top, right? That was basically my analogy. It got 6 likes, so no one liked it, and maybe about 400 views. Maybe more than that, 500 views. But 2 data companies read that post, reached out to me, and I had a call with them about them sponsoring this podcast because they do data for challenger brands. So the point is yes, you can have all this self-congratulatory stuff, but you can also, I suppose, as a content creator, and I love creating content. That's what I just love doing it. Is you can actually be really strategic, and that's why I think as a brand you can almost say, one of the things I'm writing on my newsletter, which is no wonder you're back to the negative. No wonder your buyer is ghosting you, you donut. Do this instead. Or it may be no wonder your buyer is ghosting you, you muppet. Do this instead. But I know that will get a lot of buyers, which is great for the agency side of the business. But it's fascinating. But I think what I want to, basically, I feel like a dog getting pulled in by his owner because I've just meandered off into the wilderness. But I want to go back to this. You're talking about the kind of the self-congratulatory stuff, but what's this tactic, if you want to call it that, of stacking content together? Because I think that's fascinating. And why did that work, do you think?
Yeah, so I talked about the stuff that I was doing for 6 months and just sort of learning the craft. So park all of that. Now this is the stuff that, as far as I can tell, took me from 0 to 1 and made it blow up, which of course is laid on top of all of the fundamentals. So the first thing that I noticed, and the problem that I had, was it's chicken and egg problem. If you got no followers, how the hell do you grow? Because you're not getting any exposure. So you put out a piece of gold, and I definitely think that I put out, the odd really great objective.
You definitely did.
Post
You did, yeah.
back in the day, but it wasn't like blowing up. And because, of course, it's only being surfaced to a small number of people, even if its engagement rates are huge. And obviously on my sort of analytics, it tells me the engagement rates. And some of these posts, I'm like, wow, that's great engagement, but why isn't LinkedIn pushing it? So my theory, and again, maybe someone who actually really understands LinkedIn would tell me this is bollocks, but I think it worked. My theory was that when LinkedIn decides who to surface your posts to, number one, obviously they'll surface them to people who follow you or a proportion of people who follow you. Number two, it will surface them to people who engaged with your last post. So by that logic, I thought, well, if I put, let's say, 5 pieces of A-grade content, the best thing that I can do, back to back to back, then there'll be a compounding sort of snowball effect where the first post will perform well by my standards, but nothing special. But then I immediately follow it. By immediately, I mean the next day. So I'm saying each of these is one day apart. I immediately follow it with another A-grade post, which then gets sent to my followers, but it also gets sent to the people who engaged with my last post, which is obviously, a slightly different pool than my followers. And then I do it again. And so each post is getting higher exposure than the one that came before it because they're feeding off the post that came before. So this is what I did. And sure enough, each post started going up and up and up. So my first post was a good performer, but within the realms of normality for me. So let's call it 50 likes, something like that. The next post was, let's say, 150 likes, which would be not unheard of for me, but unusual. Next post was like 400 likes. Wow, amazing, record breaker. And then the next post was 8,000 likes, 1.5 million impressions, and all the rest of it. So that was so the dam broke. Now, obviously, what the actual posts were had something to do with this, and I'm not saying that if I'd changed the order of the posts and the viral one had been the first one, the whole system might not have worked. So I wasn't clever enough to I didn't plan the order thinking, oh, that will be the one that goes through. I wasn't like that clever. But I did think that this kind of like intensity of quality content was responsible for me finally fixing the chicken and egg problem. Now, of course, the issue with it is that it's incredibly laborious to churn out that content because, you know, these are higher quality posts, so they're higher effort posts. And now I've set a bit of a precedent, which is quite hard for me to keep up with. But, you know, so far I'm just riding the train and going to see where it takes me. But that was, that was my kind of, my compounding insight.